Hi, I'm Barbara Best,
And I'm Nancy Rizzuto.
and we're both founding partners and principals of CAP STRAT, and we're also founders of the CAP STRAT Women's Forum. The core mission of our Women's Forum is to help women succeed in life, personally, professionally, and especially financially.
And we are so passionate about educating, engaging, and empowering women on all aspects of their life. So thanks for being here, and we hope you enjoy the program. Our speakers today are leading the way in living their purpose while creating a legacy. We're excited to have this conversation, so let's get started and introduce our guests. Mona Duffes is the Chief Executive Officer of Dawning Family Services, an agency dedicated to ending homelessness for families in the greater Tampa area. Mona is a true change agent in social impact organizations with deep expertise in some of our country's toughest challenges, including homelessness, behavioral health, workforce development, and child welfare issues. She believes that we are our brother's keepers, and she acts on this belief by supporting her community as a nonprofit executive and by serving on a number of community advisory boards that address these and other challenges.
And our other speaker, K. Sujata, is a consultant and advisor to social impact organization and leaders, helping them accelerate growth and achieve impact at scale. Nancy and I had the pleasure of meeting Sujata during her tenure as president and CEO of the Chicago Foundation for Women, a thriving and vibrant organization as a result of the double-digit growth that she was able to help them experience under her direction. And for those of you who are joining us from other cities, the CFW is a grant-making organization focused on funding basic rights and equal opportunities for women and girls in our region here. And there are so many other contributions and accomplishments, including academic ones that I can share, but let's just say they're really impressive so that you can hear directly from Sujata and of course, Mona as well. So let's jump into the first question. Sujata and Mona, when I look at the two of you and I look at your experience and your career paths, you really pursued purposeful work in mission-based organizations early on in those careers. So Sujata, starting with you, was that intentional? Was that something that you prioritized pursuing in your career? And if so, what inspired you to do so?
Thanks, Barbara, and thanks, Nancy, for inviting me this afternoon. I wish it were intentional. I meet with so many young women, and they tend to be mostly young women who are really thinking about this intentionality around their lives and being mission aligned. So I do want to say, like in my case, it wasn't so. My first career was as a scientist, as an engineer, and used to solving problems, used to strategy and things like that. At the same time, though, I must say that I volunteered in any number of capacities from the time that I was a teenager. And some of this, I think, comes from seeing, how my mother was in the community. She was amma, or mother, for the neighborhood kids and the neighborhood families, and so she was a role model. And as I got married, I saw my mother-in-law do a lot of charity work and end up getting an OBE, an Order of the British Empire from the Queen. So these are sort of the role models I live with. But having said that, while I volunteered, I've always volunteered for a long time. It wasn't until I turned 40, I didn't go out and buy a sports car. We decided to change careers and work for a nonprofit, run a nonprofit that I had volunteered at for a fairly long time. And at the time, it wasn't because it was necessarily mission aligned or I was looking for a purposeful way of living. It was more that I was interested in solving a challenge that the organization that I'd been volunteering at was facing. It was undergoing some really deep issues, and this was a time of turnarounds, and it really allowed me to bring many of my management skills. At the same time, I learned a lot. I have to say, it has been one of the most transformative experiences of my life, doing that work, which was working with immigrant battered women and their children living in the Chicago region. So that continues to be sort of a guiding light. And I want to say that, as I moved on from that position, I never thought of going back to manufacturing, working in a factory. This type of work continued in my life. I continued to work in the area of homelessness, as you heard, in the area of women's rights. And now, as a management consultant to nonprofits, I'm really focused on organizations that are making change in their communities, that are really wanting to scale up. I'm really interested in supporting leaders, first-time CEOs, particularly people of color, thrive in their roles and grow in their roles. So.
Well, thank you. We need strong leadership, business leaders in nonprofits, right, just so they can keep sustaining their mission. Thank you for sharing that. Mona, how about you? Early on, selecting a mission-based career, what was your inspiration?
Yeah, I would say yes, subconsciously. There is a saying that I really love. It says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And for me, I saw my parents model the concept of that you are your brother's keeper, of giving back to your community, even though they came from really modest means. So that looked like us always cleaning out our closet. That looked like, us always volunteering. My parents were on boards, donated to community needs, helped out at the church, helped out their neighbors. On a professional level, what I saw my parents also do was live purposefully. My mom had a passion for teaching. She was a nurse by trade and decided to open up a nursing school to be able to support people in the community. And the folks who really benefited were other immigrants. I'm a first-generation American, and there were a lot of immigrant families who were looking for a fresh start. There were a lot of families who were looking to provide better for a lot of people who were looking to provide better for their families, who maybe worked during the day and then went to school at night. And this was how my parents put food on our table. But you would also see them extend that hand of caring to those students and offer scholarships for those who were trying really hard but just couldn't make it. So from a very early age, I have had an instilling of community and of social justice that really was a rudder for me. When I got to college, I thought that was going to translate into me being an attorney. And the more that I pursued that track and studied, something didn't feel right. There was a restlessness, and us women were very intuitive. That feeling, right? That something is just not jiving. And so I did all the things that folks do when they're trying to figure out what their career is. Spoke with a career advisor, took assessments. The assessments outlined law and social work, among other things. So I decided to take at least a course in a handful of the areas that were identified on that career assessment. When I did my introductory to social work class, I was hooked immediately. It was the social justice focus, and it was a community-wide support focus that really that really hooked me from day one. I remember taking one day of class actually, and changing my major. And so personally and professionally, I'll always seek to support vulnerable populations and those who are disenfranchised.
So would you, thank you very much for that. And it's interesting in terms of your intuition. I think one of a woman's greatest gift is her intuition, is to listen to that internal voice. So a great pivot early on. How would you describe your purpose? Do you have a purpose statement? Is there anything that you can, help women on the call gain some insights as to how they can gain clarity around their purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a woman of faith. So at my core, I believe that we are created on purpose, with a purpose and for a purpose. My purpose as a woman of color, as a daughter of immigrants, has always centered around justice. I've experienced what it means to be discriminated against, and I belong to both a gender group and a ethnic group that experiences discrimination and oppression worldwide. So what I learned from that was I gained a sensitivity to injustice and wanting to help combat that. So for me, justice is core to who I am and core to my purpose, professionally and personally. And like as a practical matter, when we think of, how if someone's trying to hone in on finding their purpose or finding how they can be more purposeful in their life, I like to use the analogy of baking. So to get the right output, you have to have the right ingredients. If I want to bake a cake, I'm going to have a little bit different ingredients than if I want to bake a bread. So the three ingredients I look to in terms of encouraging someone on how to find their purpose are these. So you want to look at how you have persevered through pain points and through pressures. So it requires some reflection back on how you overcame those challenges. And then what did you learn from them? And what did you learn that could be beneficial to others? So that's the first one. Second ingredient is passion. So that is what makes you feel most alive. If money were no object at all, what in the world would you be spending all or most of your time doing? Not necessarily that you have to wait to do that for money not to be an option, but as an example, that could be a talent, that could be interest, that could be hobbies. Sujata talked about her volunteering earlier and how she was an engineer, but how, that really drew her into making that change and joining organization, using her skills and talents so that she was able to support a mission and a purpose that she believed in. So, passion is really important to reflect upon in terms of what really brings you alive. And then the third ingredient would be proactively paying it forward. So in what ways can you use your passion and your lessons learned from persevering through pain points and pressure points to serve others? For me, those are the three ingredients to really start that journey of finding your purpose.
Yeah, those are all great points, Mona, and I hear what you're saying on such a broad scale. Sujata, how about you? How would you describe your purpose, and has it evolved over the years?
Yeah, so I so agree with Mona about, and I like the way she's laid it out in 3 points, and I'll really focus on the passion and the pay it forward piece, because I mentioned this in this morning's conversation, that, and I'll say it here again, that one of the board members that I worked with when I was at Chicago Foundation for Women said something that has stayed with me. She says, what are you most incensed by? What are you most angry about that you want to affect, that you want to change, that you want to give some time to? And if you can, and that's sort of going to that passion that Mona was talking about, like, what is it that you want to change? So for me, it comes, I want to say, it really comes from a place of not pain, but from a place of privilege. By now, I was an engineer. I worked, I worked primarily in a male-dominated field, and I saw the access I had, saw the assets I was able to get as a result of that. All of the things that that kind of a profession can give you. And I wanted that for other women. I wanted that to be widely available for girls, right? And I wanted them to feel joy in math and science and engineering in a way that I had experienced. The other piece that really, so women's economic empowerment, women and girls' economic empowerment is really at the top of the list. The other thing, as an immigrant, even though I might not have experienced some of the most dire abuse and consequences, I see that. I certainly experienced slights. I feel like there's a lot of work to be done there. And then, as a South Asian immigrant, I want to give back to my community, even though I live many thousands of miles away. I want to be able to give back to my community here. So sometimes I do it in the smallest things, like I do an interview for a podcast for an organization that works with change makers in India. And so it has been very fulfilling to hear those stories, to broadcast those stories, and to tell those stories to a wider public. So I also understand that, unlike Mona, I'm not a social worker. I don't do any direct service, but there are other skills that I bring that as a management consultant to nonprofits that I can still pay it forward, whether it's for a living or whether it's for my passion. So.
That's great. Thank you so much, Sujata.
I have to take issue. I do think you do a lot of service. I don't know. Yeah. I'll have to talk to you later about that, but how you're defining that. You make it sound so, both of you made it sound so simple, because I think sometimes we think it takes some courage to live a life more fully aligned with our purpose. We've got our financial and career goals, and okay, I just need to get this work done, and I'll focus on that higher value work later. But then 5 years, 10 years goes by, we get caught up in a lot of responsibilities to our family and our work. But how do you make that shift and move into that purpose? Do you think if you're in an organization that doesn't feel like culturally it's aligned with your purpose, what would you suggest doing to people that are in that situation?
It's not so easy, right, Barbara? It's not just about courage. So I've been thinking a lot about my own privilege, and it's easy for me to say that, at 40, I shifted careers. I was able to take a more than 40% pay cut. Like, how many of us are really in a position to do that? I really see that as a place of privilege. I have a supportive spouse who has a stable job, and who was encouraging of my wanting to make a shift without question, right? I don't have kids to raise. I don't have a particularly flamboyant lifestyle. So all of these things worked in my favor. It's also one thing to say that I don't want to work with a company or a corporation that's not aligned to my life's mission, right? It's not so easy for everyone to do that. But having said that, and having saying like, let me wait until I'm able, is not also an answer. There are many things, many small things that you can do, whether it is, as I said, one of the things I did when I was a graduate student, making $650 a month at that point in time in my life, I decided I wanted to do some volunteering. So I went to the local high school, and they said, oh, there's a class of truant kids. We'd like you to support the teacher in that classroom. And I'm like, okay, I've never done this. I'd never, I didn't go to high school here. I didn't know what it looked like. But I met these amazing set of young people who were called truants, but who really were brilliant, but not, they were not being motivated to their full potential. So here was an opportunity to work with young people that I had not imagined. And, coming from India, like, why would you squander this, right? But being in that classroom made me realize, like, why, it was not squandering. It's just that they weren't being inspired to live up to their full potential. So there's lots of things that you can do. If you don't have the time, if you have the money, give it. A lot of organizations are in need. Every nonprofit organization is always in need of money. And nothing counts as much as that donation that is from an individual donor, which is flexible, which is consistent, which is given out of love and passion. So that is certainly something that you give, and every bit counts. I used to say, like, it's $10 more that the organization didn't have last year that they have this year. So lots of small things that one can do. And
I love that, Sujata, and I love that you stepped out of your comfort zone to mentor those kids. I would agree with you. We need more of that type of action. And Mona, how about you as a professional? What are some of the biggest challenges in living your purpose at work, and how do you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. For me, when I look back on my career, overarching, the biggest challenges have come where I felt like there was a misalignment with my purpose and values, and how the agency was operating. So that could happen for a variety of reasons. Maybe the agency stated mission wasn't really aligning with the impact that they were, saying that they were having, or maybe it's something that's completely out of your hands. So it might be something political that's just distracting from the mission, or a crisis situation that's distracting, as you should spend time and focus and attention. I always go back, though, to, what drew me to that organization, that aligned with, what I feel my purpose is, and take that step back and reevaluate. As a leader, I found that those are often opportunities, right, to make change. Sometimes on a small scale on an agency level, and sometimes it ripples into the community. So often that involves changing the culture, and making agencies stronger, better, because the nonprofits are the ones that are serving the most vulnerable in the community. And if they are ill-equipped or inefficient to be able to do that, that really hurts the folks who, would benefit from the most support. Early on in my career is really when I feel like I've learned a valuable lesson. You have less clout, you have less ability to kind of change agency cultures at that point. And I learned a valuable lesson of just fit, right? There was, I'll go back to my analogy of baking, right? So if I'm making a cake, you have ingredients that you have to make a cake, right? Typically flour, sugar, eggs. Those are the non-negotiables. If anybody ever gets a sweet treat from me, know that there's nutmeg in it and probably cinnamon. I love those spices and I always use them. So those are the negotiables. And so I learned early on to separate my negotiables from my non-negotiables. But if my ability to stay true to my values and purpose, which are the non-negotiables, were graded against with how an agency operated, I learned early on that it's okay to make that move and to make that shift.
Yeah, that's a great point. Just really staying true to your principles and your values. So in the time we have left, let's shift gears to legacy. As I mentioned earlier, legacy doesn't just mean sharing or gifting your financial resources, although that's important. Sujata, can you share with us a little bit about what does leaving a legacy mean to you, and what are some of the myths around legacy?
Yeah, legacy sounds like such a big word, right? And it is a big word. It seems overwhelming when I think about, and it seems so far away. It seems like you have to be a Mother Teresa or a Mahatma Gandhi or a Nelson Mandela, and but then you think about these people, right? Like, oh, Gandhi, I think about Gandhi. It was like an ordinary man, right? He was an ordinary man who saw injustice, right? Who saw something terribly, terribly wrong and decided he was going to do something about it and change the face of a nation. And he had a lot of people working with him. So it does seem overwhelming when you think about the word legacy, but we all have our spheres of influence, right? We live in a family, we live in a community, we live in a neighborhood, and we see things, we notice things. There are things that we can change that are within our purview. So I think about that. But then we also have community, that people that we can work with. And so I gave the example of small things, right? But I think it makes a difference. So my mother never worked outside the house, right? She was a homemaker or a stay-at-home mom. Call her what you will. Like, she's going to turn 90 next year, but she always she cared about the children in the neighborhood to the point that they called her, like I said, Amma, like mother, right? She helped children get educated, paid for their education, which was possible given her limited means. Now that she's older, she can do much more, and she does much more. But certainly, I think about her, and I think about like the legacy, her legacy is like the change she's made in the lives of those young girls who continue to move forward. I saw my aunt, who passed away recently, teach in an orphanage, in a girls' orphanage. Those girls, many, many years after they left the orphanage and are leading productive careers, came back to visit her. And, so that's a legacy, right? Like, you don't have to change a nation. You like I said, you don't have to be Nelson Mandela. I also want to say, like, this thing about money, I think it's so important. Nonprofits do need money. And not everybody is a McKinsey Scott or a Melinda Gates, right? But we all can do our part, even if it's small amounts, $250 through your giving circle. Somebody mentioned the Impact 100. You have a different name in your community, but that is a like-minded group of women who come together, who pull their funds together to make strategic decisions on where to give that money. So your $1,000 in that particular case becomes $100,000 for that organization that receives that money. That's tremendous leverage, right? Like, think about it. But you also make a group of friends. You have a group. You may create a group of professional networks as part of it. So it has multiple ways. It has a multiplication factor that goes beyond your 250 or 1,000 over the course of a year. So I want to sort of leave that there.
Awesome. And I think, do we have time for one more question for Mona, Barbara?
Yeah, just actually, Mona, if you want to add on that idea of legacy, what's your perspective on ways people can leave a legacy without getting overwhelmed about how big that has to be?
Yeah, I mean, legacy can be a loaded word. I would say it starts with really understanding your purpose, and that will help you to hone in on where you would like to be purposeful. As someone who has led both for-profits and nonprofits, I can tell you that the currency in nonprofits is a little bit different. It is exponential. So every time that you give of your time, your talent, and certainly your treasure, that has exponential impact on that community. And that can be volunteering, pouring into people who are really, at a low point in their lives, and certainly running an agency dedicated to eradicating homelessness for families during these really unprecedented times of COVID. We saw families who never needed help before. And so having that sympathetic ear, having people donate, clothes and other goods was so important. Your talent. So in addition to the tangible funding needs, I saw someone, I think it was Mary Hart, popped up that talked about operations. And I mean, that's so critical to giving that flexible funding so that nonprofits can be nimble and relevant in real time and addressing their mission. But we also operate on social currency. So this is an accomplished group of women being able to connect the nonprofit or the social impact or the cause that you're interested in to your circle can really, again, have that exponential impact. And then, of course, treasure. So it doesn't have to be, as Sujata said, you don't have to do a Mackenzie Scott level gift, but, just monthly donations. $25, joining a giving circle like Impact. Also looking at your planned giving in terms of a legacy. You plan for taking care of your family. Also consider planning to take care of the causes that you care about. So for me, that time, treasure, and talent really combine to help you leave a legacy in someone's world.
Well, thank you. And I think I wanted to call out that both of you talked about the impact that your mothers had on you and mothers-in-law. And I do think as a mother myself and impacted by my mother, I've tried to lead by example. And it's such a great thing to do with your kids, right? Whether you're a mother, an aunt, or just mentor a young woman, it's really great to create that culture and concept of giving back. So that is certainly important in what we do in our actions. So Sujata and Mona, thank you. I know I offered for people to add questions to the chat, and I guess we've just kind of covered everything, so I haven't seen any. We really appreciate just you sharing your story, how enriched your lives and how impactful they've been, and how fulfilling it's been to have a life connected to your purpose. And so thank you for that. Your remarks really also underscored how it's really easy for all of us to find ways of aligning with our purpose. I love Sujata saying, what are the things that you're really angry about and that you want to change, right? To prioritize what to focus on. So I think you've inspired a lot of us to realize we don't need to be that courageous to just live a life more aligned with our purpose. It's a lot easier than we think sometimes if we just pause and be more intentional, or maybe be awake to how we are doing that and celebrate that. So also speaking of legacy, Nancy and I are happy to help any of you who are interested in learning more about being more financially strategic with your charitable giving and fulfilling some of the financial aspects of your purpose and legacy goals, because there are some ways that you can really benefit the organization more greatly and yourself actually as well to help you sustain your giving in the long run.